Kansas gearing up to play Oklahoma State in the midst of its worst stretch of basketball under Bill Self since he started at Kansas. And Barry Trammell, who is one of the most long-tenured, well-respected journalists in the conference, drops a story in the Tulsa World leading up to this game that Bill Self reportedly gave long, hard thought to leaving Kansas for Oklahoma State this past offseason. That's the report. Now, I'm going to read you everything that the report says, okay? It's not the first time, I will say, it is not the first time that I've heard something to that effect about Bill Self. All right. Gonna have to block here. Sorry about that. Live chat getting a little crazy. It's not the first time I've heard something to this effect about Bill Self. One of those times was the Texas job with Rodney Terry. At least that Texas was interested. That time I didn't really hear how much Bill Self had actually reciprocated interest there. But I would say it was not a particularly super well-kept secret that the Oklahoma State Bill Self thing had happened to some extent this offseason. Now, it's in the eye of the beholder how much you actually believe he was really considering it or not. And that's what this back and forth is going to turn into between Trammell and Self. So, like, how legit is this thing? And can you make the case that this would actually be the best possible thing for Kansas basketball? That's what I'm going to get into here. So, Barry Trammell, as I said, not like a clickbait guy. Barry Trammell has been he wrote for the Oklahoman forever. Now he's with the Tulsa World. He's somebody that I respect a lot, and I definitely listen when he talks. Not a clickbait guy. And like I said, like I heard about the Oklahoma State Bill Self stuff from the Kansas side of this equation over the offseason. Now, I will admit, even when I heard it then, it's hard to be like, you question it a little bit. Like, man, does this really make sense that he would consider that? Here's what Barry Trammell said, okay? Multiple Cowboy sources said, no, so pay attention there. Cowboy sources, we're talking about from the Oklahoma State side of this. Multiple Cowboy sources said OSU took a swing at Self, and Cowboy decision makers grew increasingly confident that Self was impressed with the organization of the plan his alma mater had produced and was intrigued at the package, complete with competitive salary and budget to pay players in the new professional age of college basketball. And for a couple of days last spring, Self holed up in a lodge at Karsten Creek and seriously considered the offer. Quote, by far the closest it's ever come to happening, one OSU insider said of bringing back Self. Now, here's a part of the story that I honestly didn't know this, or if I did, like I had completely forgotten it. But in 2008, then Cowboy athletic director Mike Holder thought he had lured Self back in the wake of Kansas's NCAA championship. But no, Self chose to stay just like he did last spring and continue to build on an amazing legacy. Another Cowboy source said only Self could accurately describe how close he came to accepting the OSU offer. Efforts to reach Self this week failed, but the source described the courtship as consisting of long and deep conversations. He certainly seemed interested. All right, so there's a lot, right? That's more than just like one small line in the story. There's a lot of elaboration there. And there are a lot of things you could very credibly throw back at Oklahoma State sourcing, putting this out there, being like, okay, you guys thought that he was really into you. You guys thought that he was really into you, huh? Kansas fan, I'm sure, would be like, pardon using this reference, but Kansas fan would probably say, hey, you go to the gentleman's club, right? You think the strippers are into you there? Like that would be kind of the pushback here that I'm sure you're going to get from some Kansas fans. Here's the reason that I think it's at least a little bit more plausible than you might think on the surface. Like, Bill Self's had the health problems, might be looking for lower stress because of that. He's a victim of his own success right now, where the guy's going to be like a 7 seed in the tournament, and Kansas fans are acting like the sky is falling and, calling for him to be fired on Twitter all over the place. Every burner with Naismith 69 Badunga in their name. Like, they're all calling for him to be fired because of what this season has been. It's wild. There's new coach hot boards all over the place. Even fairly reasonable Kansas fans talking about like coaching hot boards, looking at what could be coming here. That's got to be frustrating. And if you could offload it to go to a job that still gives you the resources to win at a high level, but alleviates some of that stress and would make you a hero. Like, you take Oklahoma State to be in a 7 seed right now, you'd be a hero in Stillwater. So it's also home. That's the pitch for it. Now, obviously that didn't entice him to come over. And does it, I also saw people questioning, does it really matter whether or not he was actually considering this? Like, why do we care? Well, I think you care because you've had a ton of college basketball coaches retire here in this new era. We've had this wave of the Tony Bennett, Roy Williams, Coach K's of the world. Even if you want to go to Leonard Hamilton, Jim Boeheim, all these guys who are just saying, I'm not going to deal with this. Jim Larinaga, I'm not going to deal with this anymore in this era of college hoops. Bill Self has had health issues. If he's got a wandering eye looking for something that would, objectively be a less stressful job, is that something that could be in the future there? If you're somebody that doesn't believe he would ever jump for another job, which seems still very unlikely that you'd ever pull the trigger on that, does this just mean that he is closer to actual retirement here? Which that would be a massive, massive deal. I don't care what the spoiled Kansas fans think. The odds of hiring somebody better than Bill Self at Kansas who's going to have more success there, not high. So that would dramatically change a lot of things for the Big 12. And it's important beyond just Kansas. I raised this topic recently on the show within the last couple of weeks. Like, hey, if you are trying to decouple basketball and make more money because of your basketball product, you really need Kansas to be good. I mean, it's one thing to have a bunch of really great teams. And yes, Houston's been awesome. Baylor's won a national championship. None of them have like the brand power and cachet and like, hey, we got to tune in to watch Kansas. Like Kansas has that. So it's better for the league if they are good. And if they are getting rid of, a guy who was, to me, the best head coach in college basketball before this full-on NIL portal era started and had been for a 15 to 20 year stretch, that's a pretty significant shift for the conference. That Yormark, who was just campaigning on College Game Day, as we talked about how damn good the league is in basketball, you got to be keeping your eye on that, man. You don't want to see Bill Self gone. So that's why this really perks you up, makes you look around and say, hey, all right, like how legit actually is this? Could we see some kind of movement with Bill Self by the into this year, into next year, whatever it's like? Is the end of the Bill Self era closer at Kansas than we thought it was? That's the real question here, regardless of how serious you actually take Oklahoma State. And I know, look, if I were a Kansas fan, I would be mocking this too. I would do the exact same thing. I understand that reaction. I don't really blame any Kansas fan for that reaction at all. But I would wonder underneath the surface, is this something I should be thinking about in terms of like he's going to step down? Now, how could this be the best thing for Kansas? I mean, I guess obviously there is the Kansas fantasy land, that portion of the fan base right now would say, well, yeah, then you hire Dan Hurley or you hire Brad Stevens or whoever it's going to be, and they're awesome. Yes, there is that. But to me, it's more like, hey, this seemed to be something that, one, judging by Bill Self's response, which, by the way, I didn't play that for you. Let me play that for you here before I get further down this road. Like, look at Bill Self's response, put that together with how they played this weekend, and you can start to formulate what I'm saying here about like, hey, maybe this actually was a really good thing. So here's what Bill Self had to say when asked about it at his press conference. Maybe.
I did talk to him, and I spoke to OSU every time there's been an opening in that position for the last, since Coach Sutton had left. So not necessarily about hiring me, but about, could be names or what I thought needed to happen in order for OSU to compete in this league at a high level. So yeah, I did talk to them. I also read in that article that I stayed holed up. What was the term? Hold up at Karsten Creek. I have holed up in Stillwater before, but it's only been the night before that we've actually played a game. I haven't been to Stillwater and spent a night in the last 20 years unless I believe, I could be accurate, maybe I did 15 years ago or something at some point in time at a reunion or something, but I haven't been there unless my team's staying there. So that was totally inaccurate. I think that they got the right guy. But I did talk to them, and my administration knew that I talked to them. But it wasn't near to the point of what was presented in the article, at least the way it was presented to me after other people have read it. So that's basically it.
All right. First of all, much like I talked about with Brett Yormark, very masterful job there by Bill Self, and just kind of like, yes, he is more or less denying here, but like shaping the conversation in the way that he wants it to. Excellent work there. But that seems to me like a guy who's probably like, look, this is getting ridiculous. Like, the walls are closing in for my own fan base. I'm hearing all this noise because I have 1 year, like one season. That's not me being one of the best, like 10 teams in the country. Literally the one time that it's happened. I know Kansas fans would look at me like, last year too, John. Like, okay. That was not like, look at North Carolina struggling to get into the tourney right now. Duke has had down years. Kentucky's had plenty of down years. Like all the other blue bloods, UCLA, Indiana, I don't even know that those, qualify. All of these programs have this. Kansas has not. It's been an impeccable run of consistency here, and he's having to deal with all that. And now, hey, we're in the midst. We're at our rock bottom, right? We just got completely drilled by BYU, and now you're going to throw this story out there. Felt to me like a thing that could rally the team, and then we went out and saw Kansas just totally destroy Oklahoma State this weekend. Keep your eye on Kansas. I, first of all, would have said that before any of this happened, because it's Bill freaking Self that is still the coach there. And it's not like they don't have some legitimate talent on the team. Kansas fans, I'm sure, would fight me about the level of that talent, but man, that's definitely a team that still could make a second weekend run in the tournament. And then we'll all be feeling a little bit silly about this whole conversation that we're having. And this type of event to bring the team together, there've been whispers about chemistry and issues there with Kansas. Totally seems like the type of thing that could be like, guys, look at this, man. Now they're trying to like push Bill Self out and coming up with these stories about him wanting to leave us for Oklahoma State. Like, screw this. We're going to band together. Let's figure this out. I do think that's the type of thing that could happen here. I know it's just one win over Oklahoma State. They're not a great team, but Kansas had not been blowing people out that they should be blowing out at home most of the year. So step in the right direction, Kansas fans. Maybe this will be exactly what you needed. Maybe this will be exactly what the season needed. It's a obviously fascinating story with a lot of different angles that was going to draw a lot of attention from all different corners of the Big 12 sports world.